If you walk out of this restaurant tonight, Matilda said, her voice low and sharp, I will personally sell your penthouse. Kingson didn't even look up from his phone. Sell it. Matilda slammed her hand on the table. Kim Kingson. That made him look up. She was staring at him the way only a mother could, equal parts love and murder. Her fingers were wrapped around her wine glass so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Kingson leaned back in his chair, studied her face for a second, then exhaled slowly. Mother. His voice was flat. This is the 7th time this year. And it will be the 70th if I have to. She lifted her chin. You are 32 years old. Powerful. Handsome. Rich enough to buy this entire city block. She paused. And completely alone. He said nothing. Just sit. She straightened. One dinner. That is all I am asking. Kingson slid his phone into his jacket pocket. He looked around the restaurant. His mother's restaurant, marble floors, warm amber lighting, the kind of quiet elegance that made people whisper. Then he looked back at her. 1 hour, he said. And I'm leaving. Matilda smiled. The kind of smile she was very careful to hide. Because she had said the same prayer before every single blind date she had arranged for her son. And every single time, Kingson had walked out within 20 minutes. Cold. Unmoved. Like sitting across from a wall. But something about tonight felt different. She couldn't explain it. She had simply felt it the moment she picked up the phone to call the girl. She just didn't know why yet. Across the city, Juliana was already running late. She stood in her small bathroom mirror, pressing her earring in with one hand, balancing her phone against her shoulder with the other. Her best friend's voice was loud on the other end. You look amazing, stop stressing. You can't even see me, Diana. I know you. You're standing in front of that mirror making the same face you make before every interview. Stop it. Juliana exhaled. She looked at herself. The burgundy dress, the simple jewelry, the tired eyes she had tried her best to hide under careful makeup. She looked fine. She knew she looked fine. That wasn't the problem. It's just dinner, Diana said. The woman just wants to meet you. It's probably nothing serious. She said her son will be there. Silence on the other end. Diana. Okay, so it's a little serious. But still, free food, good restaurant, what's the worst that can happen? Juliana didn't answer that. She thought about smart instead. Her 2-year-old boy was already asleep in the next room, exhausted from a full afternoon of running Diana's patience into the ground. He was fine. He was safe. She had checked on him 3 times already. She grabbed her bag and keys. I'll call you after, she said. You better. And Juliana. Diana's voice softened. You deserve a good night out. Just breathe. She hung up. Juliana stood at her front door for a moment. Just stood there. Something she could not name was sitting in her chest. Not excitement, not dread. Something quieter than both. Like her body already knew something her mind hadn't caught up to yet. She opened the door and left. The restaurant was exactly what she expected. Beautiful in the way that made her straighten her posture the moment she walked in. A host guided her toward a private section near the back. Soft music. Warm light. A woman already seated at the table who looked up the second Juliana approached. Matilda stood immediately. Juliana. She clasped both of Juliana's hands before she could even introduce herself. Look at you. You're even more beautiful in person. Juliana smiled. Thank you. You're very kind, Mrs. Kim. Matilda. Please. She gestured to the seat across from her. My son will join us shortly. He is. The restaurant entrance opened. Matilda's sentence died. Not because anything dramatic happened. Not because the lights shifted or the music stopped. But because Juliana had gone completely still. The kind of still that happens when the body reacts before the mind gives permission. Kingson walked in and immediately saw her. He stopped. 3 seconds. 4. The entire room continued moving around them. Waiters, conversations, soft laughter from other tables. But between those two, everything had gone completely silent. Matilda looked from her son to Juliana, then back to her son. She had watched Kingson walk into this restaurant for 7 blind dates and she had never, not once, seen him stop walking. He was still standing at the entrance. Juliana was gripping the edge of the table. Matilda sat down slowly and pretended to look at her menu. But her eyes stayed on both of them. Kingson crossed the room. He pulled out the chair across from Juliana and sat down without a word. The host appeared immediately, poured water, smiled, disappeared. Matilda said something cheerful about the evening menu. Neither of them responded. They were looking at each other the way people look at something they thought they had lost. Juliana. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Kingson. Hers did too. Matilda set down her menu very slowly. Her son had just said a woman's name like it cost him something. In 32 years of life, she had never once heard that from him. Not with any woman. Not with anyone. She picked up her wine glass and took the longest, most deliberate sip of her evening. Something had happened between these two before tonight. She was certain of it. She didn't know what. She didn't know when. But the way they were sitting across from each other, like two people who had already said goodbye and were not prepared to be in the same room again, told her everything she needed to know. This woman was not a stranger to her son, and her son was not a stranger to this woman.
Hello everyone, long time no see. Welcome back to Miss Afro-Korean Stories. I've been away for a while because of the suspension, but I'm back with another beautiful story for you all. And while we wait for the 90-day suspension to finally come to an end, I thought to myself, instead of sitting and waiting, why not continue giving you amazing stories to keep you entertained and engaged? If you're new here, please don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and drop a positive comment to support the channel. Now let me ask you, have your parents ever pressured you to get married because they wanted grandchildren? How did you handle it? Meet me in the comment section, grab your popcorn, and let's begin.
Dinner was quiet in the beginning. Matilda carried most of the conversation, asking Juliana careful questions about her work, her life, her interests. Juliana answered with grace, composed and warm, the kind of woman who made rooms feel calmer just by being in them. Kingson barely spoke, but he didn't leave. That alone was enough to make Matilda's heart do something embarrassing. He sat there the entire dinner, watching Juliana answer questions, watching the way she tucked her hair back when she laughed, watching the way she paused before every careful answer, like someone who had learned a long time ago to think before she spoke. At one point, Juliana glanced at him and caught him staring. He didn't look away. She did. And that small moment, that tiny, almost invisible exchange, told Matilda more than a full conversation ever could. By the time dessert arrived, she had already made her decision. She excused herself from the table under the pretense of checking on the kitchen. She walked away slowly, turned the corner, and immediately pressed her back against the wall out of sight. Then she exhaled. Then she smiled. Wide. The way she only smiled when she was completely alone. Because her son, her cold, impossible, emotionally armored son, was still sitting at that table. And the way he looked at Juliana was not the look of a man being politely tolerant of a blind date his mother had arranged. It was the look of a man trying to figure out how to keep something he was terrified of losing again. Again. That word landed in Matilda's mind and stayed there. Again. Which meant this was not the first time. She pressed her fingers to her lips, thinking. Then she straightened her dress, composed herself completely, and walked back toward the table with a perfectly calm expression. Inside, her mind was already moving 3 steps ahead. Because whatever had happened between her son and this woman before tonight, she was going to find out. And whatever had separated them, she was going to make sure it never happened again. 3 days passed after the blind date. Kingson said nothing about it. He returned to his routine, early mornings, long silences, business calls that lasted hours, meetings that cleared entire rooms the moment he walked in. His world ran on precision and distance. He had built it that way on purpose. But Juliana's face kept finding him. In the middle of a call. At the end of a corridor. In the quiet between one thought and the next. Her voice. The way she had said his name at that table. Not with excitement, not with performance. Just recognition. Raw and unguarded, like it had slipped out before she could stop it. He had not felt that in 2 years. He sat behind his desk late one evening, the city glowing through the floor-length window behind him. Samuel stood near the door, tablet in hand, waiting for instructions on 3 pending matters that needed decisions before morning. Kingson had not given a single one. Samuel watched him, said nothing. He had worked beside Kingson long enough to know the difference between his silences. This one was different. This one had something living inside it. The Matilda dinner, Kingson finally said. Samuel straightened slightly. Yes. The woman. A pause. Juliana. I remember her. Another long pause. Find out what you can. Samuel nodded once and left without another word. Kingson turned back toward the window. The city below moved the way it always did. Busy, indifferent, relentless. He had always found comfort in that. The world kept moving whether you were in it or not. But tonight that thought brought him nothing. Juliana was not sleeping either. She lay on her back staring at the ceiling while Smart breathed softly in the next room. The baby monitor beside her glowed green. Everything was calm. Everything was fine. And yet her chest had not stopped feeling tight since the restaurant. She had known this moment was possible. Logically. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she had always understood that Lagos was not big enough to keep 2 people apart forever. But she had told herself she was prepared. She had rehearsed it in her head 100 quiet times over 2 years. What she would say, how she would stand, how she would look completely unbothered. She had lasted about 4 seconds before her body betrayed her completely. She turned on her side. Smart had his father's eyes. She had known it from the beginning. From the very first time she looked into her son's face after he was born and felt that particular ache of recognition. She had never said it out loud. Not to Diana. Not to anyone. Saying it out loud made it real in a way she wasn't ready for. But Kingson had sat across from her tonight and smiled at something her mother-in-law said, and for one unguarded moment she had seen Smart's smile on his face, clear as daylight, and something inside her had cracked quietly. She pressed her eyes shut. She was not going to let him back in. She had made that decision 2 years ago, alone in a clinic, holding her stomach with shaking hands, realizing the man she had spent one extraordinary night with had completely vanished. No call. No message. No trace. She had raised her son alone, and she intended to keep doing exactly that. Matilda called on a Tuesday. Dinner. Sunday. Nothing formal, just family. Her voice was warm and completely unbothered. Bring yourself. That is all. Juliana opened her mouth to decline. I make the best jollof in Lagos, Matilda added casually, and my cook makes it wrong every single time, so I'll be doing it myself. Just a small thing. Something about the way she said it, the ease of it, the realness of it, made Juliana pause. Okay, she heard herself say. Sunday. She hung up and immediately questioned every single instinct she had. Diana, sitting cross-legged on the couch across the room, raised both eyebrows. What did you just agree to? Dinner. With the blind date mother? Yes. Diana stared. And the son will be there? Juliana said nothing. Diana slowly reached for her cup of tea, took a long sip and said, You are in so much trouble. Sunday came fast. Matilda's home was exactly what Juliana expected. Large, warm, filled with the kind of organized chaos that meant someone genuinely lived there. Photographs on every surface. Shoes at the entrance that Matilda immediately apologized for. Something rich and spiced coming from the kitchen that made Smart lift his head the moment they walked through the door. Juliana had brought him. She hadn't planned to. But Diana had a last-minute situation and there was no one else, and she had almost canceled 3 times before deciding she was not going to let fear make her decisions for her. Smart held her hand and looked around with wide eyes. Matilda appeared from the kitchen and stopped the moment she saw the little boy. Something moved across her face. Quick. Unguarded. She covered it immediately with a wide smile and crouched down to Smart's level. And who is this? She asked softly. Smart, he said very seriously. Matilda laughed. A real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep. Smart. What a name. She looked up at Juliana briefly. Something careful behind her eyes. He is beautiful. Thank you, Juliana said quietly. They went inside. Kingson arrived 40 minutes later. He walked in, removed his jacket, greeted his mother, turned toward the sitting room and stopped. A small boy was sitting on his mother's living room floor, completely unbothered, arranging building blocks into something that made no architectural sense but was being constructed with enormous concentration and seriousness. Kingson looked at Juliana. Juliana looked back at him. Neither of them spoke. That's Smart, Matilda said from behind him, her voice perfectly casual. Juliana's son. Come, dinner is almost ready. Kingson didn't move immediately. He stood there looking at the boy for a moment longer than was necessary. Something was pulling at the edges of his mind, something he couldn't place and couldn't name. Smart looked up from his blocks. He looked at Kingson. Then he held up one of the blocks, offering it, with the complete confidence of a child who had decided a stranger was worth trusting. Kingson stared at the small extended hand. Then he walked over slowly, lowered himself to one knee, and took the block. Smart smiled. And somewhere across the room, Juliana's breath left her body completely. Dinner was warm and full and loud in the way that Matilda engineered all her dinners to be. She talked enough for all of them, moved the conversation like someone who had been doing it her whole life, made sure no silence lasted long enough to become uncomfortable. But she watched. She watched the way Kingson kept glancing at Smart throughout the meal. She watched the way Smart, seated beside Juliana, kept looking toward Kingson with the easy curiosity of a child who didn't yet understand why certain people made him feel safe. She watched Juliana carefully not watch Kingson. And she watched her son's face when Smart laughed at something, open, unfiltered child's laughter. And the expression that crossed Kingson's face in that unguarded moment was something she had not seen on him since he was a boy himself. She picked up her fork and looked down at her plate. Her hand was not entirely steady, because she had spent years wanting grandchildren, had arranged dinner after dinner, introduction after introduction, hoping her son would finally let someone in. And now there was a small boy sitting at her table, laughing, eating, completely alive, and something in her chest was pulling toward him with a force she could not fully explain and could not push away. She looked at Smart one more time, then at Kingson. Then she understood why. And she said absolutely nothing. Samuel placed the folder on Kingson's desk without a word. Kingson looked at it, then at Samuel. Talk. Juliana Adiz Obi. Samuel clasped his hands behind his back. 26. Single mother. Runs a small events consultancy out of Lekki. Clean record, no debts, no affiliations. He paused. The boy is 2 years and 4 months old. The room went very quiet. Kingson's jaw tightened slightly. He did the calculation without meaning to, without wanting to. But the numbers landed anyway, heavy and precise like something dropped from a great height. 2 years and 4 months. Is there anything else? His voice was completely controlled. Samuel hesitated. Just barely. Nothing confirmed. But Samuel met his eyes. The boy looks like you, sir. Kingson said nothing for a long time. He stood up slowly, walked to the window, and stood there with his back to the room. Leave the folder, he finally said. Samuel left. Kingson stood at that window for a long time. The city moved below him, indifferent as always. But this time he felt nothing like comfort. He felt something cracking open inside his chest, slow, structural, the way old walls give before they fall completely. 2 years. She had been raising a child for 2 years. Alone. And the night they shared, the one night that had stayed with him longer than he had ever admitted to anyone, had ended with him waking up to an empty hotel corridor and a disconnected number and silence that he had eventually convinced himself meant she had chosen to disappear. He picked up the folder, opened it. There was a photograph inside, candid, taken outside a school. Juliana holding Smart's hand. Smart looking up at something with that wide, serious expression Kingson had seen at his mother's dinner table. He stared at the photograph for a very long time. Then he closed the folder, picked up his phone and called his mother. Matilda answered on the second ring. I need to ask you something, Kingson said. Ask. The boy. A pause. Smart. Matilda was quiet for 3 full seconds. Then she said, What about him? Mother. His voice dropped. Do you know? She exhaled slowly, the kind of exhale that carries everything inside it. Kingson. Do you know? Another silence. Longer this time. I suspected, she said quietly. I wasn't certain, but I suspected. He pressed his eyes shut. And you said nothing. Because I wanted you to love her first. Her voice was firm but soft at the same time. Not because of the child. Not because of obligation. I wanted you to choose her because you wanted her. That is the only way this works. That is the only way your family holds together. He didn't respond. Kingson. She waited. Do you? He looked at the photograph still open on his desk. I never stopped, he said, and hung up. Olivia found Juliana outside the venue of Matilda's charity fundraiser 3 days later. She was smiling. The kind of smile that had been prepared in advance. Juliana. She extended her hand graciously. I've heard so much about you. Juliana shook it. I wish I could say the same. Olivia laughed lightly. Walk with me a moment. They moved to a quieter section near the garden edge. The music from inside drifted out, muffled and warm. Olivia turned to her with that same perfect smile and lowered her voice. I'll be honest with you, she said, because I think you deserve honesty. Juliana waited. Kingson's world is not what it looks like from the outside. Olivia tilted her head. The business, the power, the family name. It is built on things that do not stay quiet forever. Men in his position attract enemies the way light attracts moths. She paused deliberately. And those enemies do not stop at the man himself. The air between them changed. They go for what he loves, Olivia continued. His vulnerabilities. His weak points. Another pause. His children. Juliana's expression didn't move, but something behind her eyes did. Olivia saw it. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying this because I've watched this world for a long time. And women who walk into it with children. She stopped. Smiled sadly. They always believe they can handle it. Until they can't. She touched Juliana's arm briefly, sympathetically, and walked back inside. Juliana stood alone in the garden. Her hands were cold. She started pulling back after that. Canceling dinners. Responding to messages late. Creating careful, polite distance that looked like a busy schedule if you weren't paying attention. Kingson noticed immediately. He appeared at her office on a Wednesday afternoon without warning. His driver waited outside. He walked into the small, warmly decorated space and looked at her across the room, and she looked back at him, and neither of them pretended this was casual. What happened? He asked. Nothing happened. I've just been busy. Juliana. She looked away. He crossed the room slowly and stopped close enough that she had no choice but to look at him again. Someone said something to you. She shook her head. Then look at me properly and tell me you're fine. She tried. She genuinely tried to hold his gaze and say the words. But something about the way he was standing there, patient, unguarded, completely unlike the cold reputation that preceded him everywhere, made the words dissolve before they reached her mouth. I can't do this, she said quietly. Do what? This. Whatever this is becoming. She stepped back. I have Smart to think about. I can't afford. Juliana. His voice stopped her. Quiet. Serious. What are you afraid of? She looked at him. Really looked at him. And what came out of her mouth next surprised even her. Losing him. Kingson went completely still. Smart. Her eyes filled. She pressed her lips together hard, fighting it. Someone told me what your world does to the people around you. And I believe them. Because I've seen what fear does to a child, Kingson. And Smart has never been afraid a single day of his life. And I will burn everything down before I let that change. Something moved through his expression. Deep and immediate. He's mine. It came out of him like a breath he had been holding for 2 years. Not a question. Not an accusation. Just the truth arriving finally between them. Juliana's tears broke before she could stop them. Yes, she whispered. The word fell into the room and changed everything inside it. Kingson didn't speak for a long moment. Then he crossed the distance between them and pulled her in. Not with desperation, not with anger. Just with the quiet force of a man finally holding something he had spent 2 years not knowing he had lost. She cried against his chest. He held her. Neither of them moved. I didn't know, he said into her hair. I want you to hear that. I did not know. And whoever made sure I didn't, he stopped. His voice hardened briefly, then softened again. That ends now. She pulled back and looked at him. I thought you left, she said. I thought you looked at what happened between us and decided I wasn't worth staying for. I woke up and the number was gone, he said. Every trace. I looked for 3 weeks before I convinced myself you had chosen to disappear. He searched her face. I never wanted to disappear from you. The truth settled between them. Not clean. Not without pain. But real. Samuel dismantled Olivia's interference piece by piece over the following 2 weeks. Every manipulation. Every planted fear. Every carefully engineered distance. He laid it all in front of Kingson without commentary. Kingson had Olivia removed from every circle permanently. No confrontation. No drama. Simply gone. And then he turned his full attention toward his family. Smart took to him with the easy confidence of a child who had somehow always been waiting. He called him King because Kingson was too long and Smart had already decided. Matilda wept openly the first time she heard it, and then immediately pretended she had something in her eye. There were difficult evenings. Honest conversations between Kingson and Juliana that lasted past midnight. Things said that needed to be said. Old pain examined and set down slowly, carefully, the way you handle something that once broke you. But they did it. The final dinner was on a Saturday. Matilda's restaurant. Same amber light. Same quiet elegance. But the table was fuller now. Louder. Alive in a way it had never been. Smart sat between Kingson and Juliana, systematically dismantling his bread roll into pieces that he then offered to everyone around the table with enormous generosity. Matilda accepted every single piece with complete seriousness. At one point she looked around the table, at her son, calm for the first time in years, at Juliana laughing at something Smart had just declared very loudly, at her grandson's small face bright and unbothered and safe, and her eyes filled completely. She didn't hide it this time. If I didn't force that blind date, she announced to the table, none of this would have happened. Kingson looked at her. You will never let that go. Absolutely not. She lifted her glass. I expect a national holiday in my honor. At minimum. Everyone laughed. Under the table, Kingson found Juliana's hand and held it. She didn't pull away. Outside, the city moved the way it always did. Fast, indifferent, relentless. But inside that restaurant, in the warm amber light, surrounded by the sound of his family laughing, Kingson felt something he had spent 32 years not knowing how to reach. Peace. Not the silence of distance. Not the quiet of someone who had simply stopped feeling. Real peace. The kind that only arrives when you stop running from the things that matter most. Smart looked up at him suddenly. King. Yes. Can we come back here tomorrow? Kingson looked at Juliana. She was already smiling. Yes, he said. We can come back tomorrow.
And that brings us to the end of today's story. One thing this story teaches us is that love, family, and understanding are very important. Sometimes, people make painful decisions not because they want to hurt us, but because they are scared, confused, or trying to protect the people they love. No matter how cold someone may seem, love and family can completely change a person. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a positive comment because your support truly means a lot to me, especially during this period. Also, share this story with your friends and family, and let me know your favorite part of the story in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next story.